Welcome. We are the Massachusetts Institute for College and Career Readiness. This is one of our quarterly national webinars. We call it MICCR. It was founded in 2014 with a grant from the Institute of Education Sciences, and is a partnership between Boston University, the Rennie Center for Education Research and Policy, Mass Inc., and the Mass Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. MICCR wishes to thank the National Collaborative on Workforce and Disability for Youth, for the use of the webinar technology. My name is Scott Solberg. I'm a co-PI on the project along with Chad Detremont from the Rennie Center and Ben Foreman from Mass Inc. Livonia, who's on our call today, is our project coordinator, and you'll see at the end of these slides her contact information if you have any follow-up questions as well. Today's topic is career literacy. Our guest is Bill Symonds, author of Pathways to Prosperity, which shed light on the fact that access to the American dream can often be achieved through two-year college degree programs. In Massachusetts, only 35% of our high school graduates obtain a post-secondary degree, only 15% of our students from lower income backgrounds. As director for the Global Pathways Institute, Bill remains committed to seeking ways for all youth to find some form of post-secondary credential and degree that enables all of us to find occupations that offer sustainable wages. Previous to his work at Harvard and now at the Arizona State University, Bill was a writer for Business Week, where he developed his ideas about the need to think more broadly about what constitutes a post-secondary education. So with that, Bill, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us about this concept of career literacy, and I'm going to step back and let you take it away.
Well, good morning or good afternoon for those of you on the East Coast. It's really a pleasure to be with you today. I'd like to extend a special welcome to those of you in Massachusetts. As you know, I was based in Boston and at Harvard and in Boston for the last 17 years. So I have many friends and associates there. It's really a pleasure to be part of the Massachusetts Institute for College and Career Readiness webinar. So today what I'd like to do is share with you the highlights of a keynote address I gave to the National Career Development Association global conference back in July. NCDA, as it's known, is the largest professional organization in the world of professionals focused on career development, and they had about 1,200 people in Denver, for this keynote address. And so I'm going to give you the highlights. That's where we really just started the national conversation about career literacy. I'm going to go over the highlights, and then, as Scott said, we're going to have plenty of time for conversation to answer your questions, etc. So this is just the cover slide we're looking at right now, reimagining the role of career development. Let me just say a word about that when we got going on this, we had a meeting of some of the real leaders in the field, and they were saying that the term career development is often not well understood, certainly outside the field, and that was one reason why we adopted the term career literacy. So just a little bit about myself. As Scott said, I was at Harvard for 7 years. I was the director of the Pathways to Prosperity project there and was the primary author of the Pathways to Prosperity report. And that got a lot of attention. I went to 40 states. And then as that work wound down, we wanted to start an institute to continue the work, and a group of leaders in Arizona suggested bringing it out to Arizona State, which was just recognized as the most innovative university in the United States by U.S. News. So this is really a great home for the work. And I've been out here for about the past year. And so our vision is that we're committed to creating an America in which all young people are prepared to lead productive and successful lives. Now, that might seem like apple pie, but it's actually calling for a significant cultural change. Because what we're saying is we need to focus on where are students going to be 5 or 10 years after they leave the education system. Have they found a career? Are they on the pathway to achieving a middle-class life and the American dream? That's really what we should be focused on. And traditionally, we've been focused more on the idea that everyone needs to go to college, and there's no question that college is essential for many careers. But we focus on that rather than what's going to come after that. Are you really being prepared to achieve the American dream? And the second part of our vision is that we believe that if we're going to achieve that, we really have to adopt and embrace the concept of multiple pathways. Not everybody is going to succeed or learn exactly the same way. So a strictly academic education works very well for some young people. It doesn't work well for all. And that's why we do need multiple pathways. So in May, we had the inaugural Southwest Pathways Conference. We brought together leaders from 5 states in the Southwest and really looked at the challenges facing young adults. And what we found was that we're failing to prepare most of the young adults in the Southwest to achieve career success, really to achieve the American dream. And that's really true nationally. We're failing to prepare a huge percentage of young people for success. And we were looking at the conference at how we can change that trajectory, how we can prepare a lot more students for success and what that's going to take. And by the way, last year's conference was sold out. We had 350 people, and we're already planning next year's conference, which is going to be on May 2nd to 4th in Scottsdale, Arizona. We'll have more capacity this year, and this is a great way to network with your colleagues and learn more about what's happening in the field. So today what I'd like to talk about is the Pathways Challenge, the fact we're failing to prepare so many young people, why that is, and then really address the question of how can we change that? How can we make a significant difference in the percentage of young people who are prepared to succeed, and then focus on the concept of career literacy and what we're trying to do, working with Scott, with the NCDA, with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and others, to start a national movement around this area. So what I call the Pathways Challenge is our failure to prepare many young people to achieve the American dream. And I think it's interesting, as we look at the presidential campaign, where we have everybody from Bernie Sanders on the left to Donald Trump on the right saying they feel the American dream is dead or endangered. I think this concept has really taken hold in the country. The polls show that the majority of Americans feel it's going to be tougher for young people today to do as well or better as their parents. There's really a widespread pessimism. And that's really a break from our heritage. We were founded as a land of opportunity. Millions of people moved here because they thought they could succeed and have a better chance than they did in the countries they came from. But today, we have a situation in which 40% of young people who start college don't graduate. Meanwhile, we have the world's highest college dropout rate, and of course, many students are drowning in debt. And meanwhile, a number of studies have suggested that roughly half of those who do graduate with a degree end up unemployed or underemployed. So there's a mismatch between education on the one hand and what the needs of the workforce are. So another factor is that so many of our students are living in poverty. And earlier this year, it was reported that the majority of U.S. school children now qualify for free or reduced price lunch. That's the highest percentage since the days of the civil rights era. And Robert Putnam wrote a book about this recently, which I would highly recommend, called Our Kids, really talking about what's happened to the American dream in recent years. And what he pointed out was in the 1950s, in the town where he grew up in Ohio, virtually every kid achieved the American dream, whether they went to college or not. They really did improve themselves. And today, Putnam concludes social mobility seems poised to plunge in the years ahead. And that's really the issue that we're focused on at the Global Pathways Institute. So how do we get into this problem? I think the key reason is that our paradigm for how we're going to prepare young people is really incomplete. We've taken a too simplistic model, which is that, let's advocate that everybody go to a four-year college. And there's no question that four-year college can be a tremendous opportunity for young people and really open the door to some great careers. The problem is that it doesn't work for everybody. The majority of young people do not earn a four-year degree. And meanwhile, because we've embraced that as the way to go ahead, we've narrowed our view of what high school is all about. We talk about the idea that high school should be about preparing you for four-year college. We ignore other alternatives, like CTE, for example. And Massachusetts, by the way, has one of the nation's very best systems of vocational high schools, which really are outperforming traditional academic high schools. Another consequence of this is that we look at community and technical college as a second or third class option. And I've been to many, many community colleges around the country. That's really a pervasive feeling on those campuses. And so these are some of the corollaries that have really had a negative impact, as we're demeaning alternatives that would actually be far better for many students if they pursued them. So the result of this is, as Scott said at the beginning, even in Massachusetts, which is arguably the nation's leader in education, most students are not ready for college. Most don't get a degree. According to ACT, nationally, only 25% of the students in last year's graduating class were fully college ready, and we have tremendous racial achievement gaps. We're doing, maybe 44% of white students are college ready, but if you look at the Latino population, which is rapidly growing, it's only 16% and only 8% of Native Americans. And meanwhile, we're almost ignoring the issue of career readiness. We talk about the idea that we want students to be college and career ready, but we don't really make a systemic effort to measure whether or not students are prepared for the workforce, whether they are career ready. And so the result is that I think our approach is leading to the problem we have today. So the question is, why are we failing so many young people? And we think our paradigm is too limited. We really need to expand our approach if we want to achieve the goal of preparing all students to lead a successful life, not just some. And right now we're doing a good job with some, but we certainly aren't preparing all. The other aspect of this is that I think our overemphasis on four-year colleges has created an elitism in terms of how we look at the labor market. And so we look up at jobs that do require a four-year degree or further, like doctors, lawyers, and engineers. But we often look down on jobs that are critically important to the economy and yet don't require those degrees. So I was just talking to a chemical engineering association yesterday, and they were complaining that not only is there a shortage of chemical engineers as baby boomers retire, but that the very skilled, highly skilled tradesmen who work in chemical plants, there's a shortage of those as well. And those jobs don't require a four-year degree, but they do pay very well. They certainly offer a solid middle-class life. So the conclusion is that if we continue down this road and we're demeaning many types of jobs that don't require a four-year degree, we're never going to revive the American dream, because that's where many of the jobs that pave the way to the middle class are located. It's a solution. It's an approach that simply isn't going to work, and that's why we need to take a new approach. So that's where we get into the idea of career literacy. And this term evolved out of a national meeting that we held last December. Scott was participating in that, as were many other leaders in the industry. And we had a day-long discussion about what's going on in career development. And the question we asked is, what would it take to really promote all of this work? Career guidance, career development is really a centerpiece of our education system. And we raised the question, what would it take for the president to raise this in the State of the Union? And that's when we came up with the idea of career literacy. That's a term that we feel is widely appealing. Everybody supports the idea of literacy, and what we're talking about here is career literacy, equipping students and adults with the knowledge, tools, and support they need to make a good career decision and then find the best pathway to pursuing that. So it's a very simple concept. We think it's very powerful, and our goal is to make this a much more central focus of education. Now, if we look at what's going on right now, this has really been a black hole in our approach to education system. We put almost no resources into career guidance. We have too few counselors in the K-12 system, and many of them have little time to provide career counseling. At the higher education level, it's a similar problem. Surveys and studies have shown that a large percentage of students in higher ed feel they really aren't being prepared adequately for the workforce. And so right now we have a massive crisis, and the costs of that are enormous. I think it's a major cause of the disengagement of students who feel like school isn't relevant or meaningful to them. And of course, it's a major problem when students make a decision on what they're going to do after high school. Where are they going to go? Many students do go on to college, but they don't know why they're there. They haven't figured out a major to pursue. They don't have good information on careers. And many of them are just wandering through the system, which is the key cause of the underemployment we have. So if we wanted to change that, what would it look like? And what we're arguing is, let's make career guidance a central focus of education. In other words, instead of saying that, obviously we want students to come out having met the standards we've set in Common Core and other programs. We want them to do that. But in addition to that, we really want them to be career literate. We want them equipped to make good decisions about their lives going forward. If we're going to do that, we need to start this process early, not wait till high school, but really start in the late elementary years, certainly a major emphasis in middle school, And in the post-secondary arena, it needs to be a key focus as well. And if we're going to do that, we need to take a collaborative approach. The counselors can be leaders in this, and Scott has done a lot of work in envisioning how this can happen. But the entire faculty needs to get involved in this as well. And we also need to engage the business community, parents, and the broader community. Here in Arizona, for example, we're working to engage retirees. And the third component is we really need to make work-based learning a far more central part of our approach to education. So on that point, I think work-based learning is one of the great opportunities we have to improve career awareness. Getting students out of the classroom into the workforce has so many different advantages. Obviously, you can, if you go into an office, a factory, or whatever, you can see how the work is being done. You can talk to people who are actually doing it. It's far more engaging than just talking about it in a classroom. If you're actually serving as an intern or apprentice, that's very, very engaging. Lots of studies have been done on that, and it's been shown overwhelmingly that it dramatically increases student engagement. It's the best way, really, to develop employability skills. Once you're in a workplace, you understand the importance of arriving on time, being appropriately dressed, you learn how to work with teams, etc. And you can talk about that in the classroom, but it's much more difficult to achieve that in a classroom setting. That's really an artificial environment. And it's really the gold standard for career exploration. That's because once the student gets out and finds out what accountants, for example, do, they're going to pretty quickly decide, is this something that appeals to me? Is this something I could be good at and really enjoy? Or is it something I hate? And as I go around the country, I've talked to so many people who are misguided. I was just down at the College and Career Ready Summit in Kentucky, and I was talking to one of the other presenters. And he had one meeting with his counselor in high school when he was getting ready to graduate. And the counselor said, Noel, your grades are really good. Your test scores are high. So you have 3 career choices. Now notice the counselor narrowed it down to just 3 career choices. He said you can go into the medical area, and you can go to law school, and the third option is to become an accountant. Now, I don't know why the counselor narrowed it down to those 3, but Noel said, well, I don't like blood, so that rules out the medical field. And then on law school, he said, the problem there is I'd have to go to law school to become a lawyer, and I don't want to spend the 7 years that would require, so that narrowed it down to accounting. He went to the University of Kentucky, majored in accounting, and at the end of his junior year, he was in a class about cost analysis, and the professor said, this is what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life as an accountant. And that's when the light bulb went off, and he said, I hate this. I don't want to spend my life doing that. And so that was the end of all of that. Now think about if he had actually been exposed and had an internship in an accounting firm much earlier in his life, in high school or maybe in his freshman year in college, he would have had that epiphany much, much earlier and wouldn't have wasted all that time and money. He ended up dropping out of the University of Kentucky after he had that realization. So that's why work-based learning can really help students in this area. And for employers, by the way, this is not charity. This is really an ideal method for identifying young people who could really be critical members of your team going forward. Now, we have some great examples of work-based learning. In Massachusetts, the vocational technical high schools are national leaders in creating these opportunities. It really is impressive. At Worcester Tech, I think they've got over 1,000 students involved in work-based learning of one form or another, and it's produced some of the highest graduation rates in the U.S. President Obama gave the commencement address a year or 2 ago at Worcester Tech. In higher ed, right in Boston, we have Northeastern, which is the national leader in the co-op model. And most students at Northeastern spend a lot of time in co-ops. They come out much better prepared than students who don't. Here in the West, we have BYU Idaho, which is doing a terrific job. 75% of their students have internships. And apprenticeships are also a very effective method. We've also developed methods for working with opportunity youth. Europe, which was founded in Boston and is now spread around the country, has developed a 1-year program, which includes 6 months for apprenticeship for youth that are disengaged right now. They're not in school or work. The program is very successful. So I think what these models suggest is work-based learning really does work. This is not an academic theory. It's something that's been proven time and again to be highly effective. The problem is we really need to figure out how are we going to scale this up. And that's why we need a national movement to promote both the concept of career literacy much more emphasis on career development, as well as providing students with a lot more opportunities for work-based learning. So at the end of the day, the question is, why does this really matter? And I think if you stop and reflect and look at the research that's been done, what you find is that if you put an emphasis on this, it has a phenomenal impact on student success. And one of the most impressive studies I like to cite was done by Gallup and Purdue. They looked at 30,000 college graduates, not at the day of graduation, but a number of years after that. And they looked at those who really had achieved success in life and what led to that success. And they found that factors that educators feel are very important, like what school you went to, whether it's public or private college, and what your GPA were, weren't all that important in terms of predicting whether you were successful. On the other hand, two factors that more than doubled the chances that you were going to be successful were, number one, did you have a mentor in college, somebody who really cared about where you were going and helped you figure that out, and did you have the opportunity for an internship or a job directly related to your field of study. Students who had those things were far more likely to be successful. In other words, this is not an academic theory. This is really something we've neglected. What I'm talking about is not radical reform. This is just common sense, but we've neglected it as a country. And I think it's a major cause of all the problems we face today regarding young people. Now, there are a number of signs of progress that we can take heart from. Most states have now adopted at least the mandate that students should develop ILPs, individual learning plans. The adoption is really spotty, and many students spend very little time on that, but at least the concept has been embraced by many states. There's been dramatic improvements in technology so that students can learn a lot more about career options and everything they offer. I mean, it's like night and day versus what it was just 5 or 10 years ago. And there's expanding efforts to collaborate and bring in the broader community. MICCR is getting very interested in this work. We're partnering with them right now in Arizona. South Carolina has been a leader in terms of bringing the business community into this work. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce is taking more interest in this issue than ever before. And as a matter of fact, the U.S. Chamber has just agreed to host the national meeting that we're going to have on career literacy early next year to really try to get this movement going. So there's a lot of good things happening. I think it's in the air that this is something we really need to do. So at the NCDA convention, I called for a national movement to get this going. The board of NCDA endorsed that and voted to partner with GPI in building this coalition. We've got a number of strong business partners. As I said, the U.S. Chamber has agreed to host our meeting. We're working closely with the Manufacturing Skills Standard Council and SME on this as well. And we want to bring in many educators and community organizations as well who are concerned about the success of our young people. Our goal is to convene this national dialogue, develop a vision and mission statement, and get more and more allies involved in this movement. And so we're planning a meeting right now. We haven't set the date, but it's going to be next February or March at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So that's a quick look at what we're talking about, and I really look forward to the discussion as we move ahead.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. I want to actually, if you could, let's just get one more slide forward to here's some contact information. So just a couple of quick business pieces before we get in the conversation. First, some people have asked about whether there are slides available. If you look above the chat box, there should be a Files To where it says Symonds PPT Solberg Webinar on Career Literacy. If you click on that, you should be able to download today's set of slides. Second is we want to use the chat box now. We have a number of people on, and we're hoping that you will begin to ask some questions or make some comments. Between Livonia, myself, and the team we have around, we'll be able to respond to those as they come in. But Bill, I just wanted to ask just maybe some context. The concept of career literacy is interesting in the sense that, you know, it came out of a conversation about how can we elevate career development into the national spotlight. And I guess I'm wondering from your perspective, there's a lot of people on the phone here. We've got people from the Society for Vocational Psychology, the National Career Development Association. We've got state leaders. We've got our MICCR senior research fellows that are here. A lot of us have been in this kind of area. Sell us. What is it about the concept or using the term career literacy that you think will provide that kind of, I don't know, that vehicle to get this into the national the national space, and where would you like to get it at the end of the day? Who needs to be, who's not at the table that you hope to see really connected?
Well, I think the term career literacy, because the idea of literacy is something that's so broadly embraced, really would help elevate the field tremendously. And I base that not just on a theory, but since the Pathways to Prosperity report came out, I've had the opportunity to speak in more than 40 states to a whole range of audiences, thousands and thousands of people, business leaders, educators, teachers, etc. And when I talk about this concept, it really resonates with a lot of people. I think, Scott, there's a growing recognition that the approach we've been on in recent years has just been too narrowly focused and really hasn't worked. I'm sure everybody on the line remembers when No Child Left Behind was passed, and we were promised that by 2014, which, by the way, was last year, that everybody was going to be up to standard and we wouldn't have an education problem anymore. And obviously that didn't happen. So I think there's a growing willingness and readiness to look at new ideas. So I think that this really does have the potential to take off. I think the time is right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does seem as though, and we're hearing some, Ellen and Janet both talking in the chat box about this being a resonating kind of concept. And it does seem as though right now there's a lot of discussion around career development. And as you were speaking, I wasn't hearing you saying that we're trying to create something new. It's more, it sounds like what you're trying to do is we're mobilizing different efforts that might be going on in different places between the business sector, the schools, higher education, to kind of get on the same page, and maybe career literacy might be able to do that. Is that kind of the idea?
Right, and I think that, well, I'd say what we're trying to do is really incorporate some of the core vision of the Common Core standard. So let's take chemistry. As I say, I was just meeting with, talking with the Chemical Engineering magazine, which goes out to chemical engineers across the country. They feel like they're facing a real crisis. Many of the leading chemical engineers are baby boomers who are nearing retirement, and they're not being replaced by a sufficient number of young engineers who are eager and excited to move into the field. So how can we change that? I think that instead of teaching chemistry as a strictly academic subject, you can embed a lot more into why is chemistry so important? What impact does it have on our society?
Right.
Most people have no idea of the huge range of things that chemical engineers do and how vitally important that is to our society. I mean, it's everything from food production to the energy industry to all kinds of materials. Chemical engineers are involved in all of that. But I'll guarantee you, while virtually every high school student in America is taking chemistry, almost none of them are aware of any of this. They're not learning about it. They don't see any relevance. Now, the interesting thing is that because of the shortage, if you graduate from college with a BS in chemical engineering, you're not only employable, you're going to be one of the highest paid graduates in the United States. I mean, this is a terrific career opportunity, but young people aren't learning about it. And I think by integrating that into the curriculum, you change chemistry from just an academic pursuit into something, why is this so relevant and important to our life today? So that would be a shift in the way the material was presented.
So you were responding a little bit to the question about how do we integrate kind of this career literacy into the Common Core, and one way would be to help within all of the academic arenas to understand that there are occupational components and opportunities that when students see the relevance of what they're learning in the classroom, that's going to hopefully motivate and inspire them to perform better. Would be one way. There's also
Scott, if I could just add one thing there. One thing that came out of our national meeting last year is the idea that as part of teacher preparation, as part of certification, we should require every aspiring teacher to take a course in career development. And the reason is to help them link the content they're teaching with what that's going to mean in the real world. And I think that could have a powerful impact on how teachers see their role in society. We'd move away from the idea that the goal is to help students pass the test, and we've really focused on that in recent years, to the idea that you're really helping these students discover what they're going to do with their life and how they're going to be successful. And I think that's a much higher calling than just saying that, my students passed the test.
Exactly. So this idea then that if we can help the whole education system, in effect, understand the role of career development in their work, that it's going to be a much more, it's easier one to get career development into the curriculum, but they're going to also help integrate it into their academic material. We've got a great discussion going on in the chat room right now about the labor market information and how one gets connected to that, which is really exciting. So I don't know how much more we need to add to it. I think people are throwing down resources and how to get to that. The question I had, and this is an interesting one, is you mentioned, the reason I want to go in this direction is it's kind of, those of us that are involved in career development, we have a general idea of a lot of what you're discussing is obviously important, and what you're describing is a national campaign to help everyone understand the central role, and hopefully this will elevate the school counseling profession. We just mentioned getting more teachers more involved. Another thing that came out of that discussion, and I would be curious to see what people's chat responses might be to it, is ensuring that every high school graduate has some kind of credential that they graduate with, that it becomes part of the expectation or mandate that they're coming out with some set of competencies that align to the world of work in some way. And I was wondering if maybe you could comment on that a little bit.
Right. So I think that goes to the question of career readiness. And, we do a lot to measure whether or not students are college ready. And, there are many different assessments. ACT certainly does an excellent job of that, for example, figuring out how many high school students are really ready to take a credit-bearing course at the post-secondary level. We've devoted very little attention to measuring whether or not students are career ready. And one way to tackle that is to advocate that students in high school, as part of their program of study, take get onto a career pathway, complete a program of study, at least 2 or 3 courses, ideally even more in that career field, and that would culminate with an industry-recognized credential, a credential that's appropriate to the high school student, obviously not for the post-secondary student. And the advantage of that is whether or not you stay in that field, you're really being introduced to what's expected in the world of work, that you are going to have to master advanced skills and really be good at that you're going to have to learn a lot about the field, et cetera, and you're going to have to meet very high standards. And a credential, if it's industry recognized, would really help solidify that. Now, some states are really embracing that. In Kentucky, for example, they now rate schools not only on how many students are college ready, but also how many are career ready. And earning that industry-recognized credential is a key measure of that. In Florida, they've really put a lot of emphasis on this, and now about half the students who graduate from high school in Florida are coming out with an industry-recognized credential. Again, I'd like to emphasize the idea that we aren't necessarily assuming or even expecting that those students are all going to stay in that industry, but they have been, I think, much better prepared, for making decisions going forward.
Yep. One of the things that's happening on the chat right now, which I want to respond to, and maybe get more responses on the chat, is this whole issue of professional development. And I know that when we had the national conversation, this issue of professional development of school counselors to really build out their career counseling skills was right at the forefront. Even discussion about a career counseling credential. What are some thoughts as you all start on the chat box as you're hearing this? We certainly had a great question. I want to get her name from Gloria Rubilar on. So, what's the PD? What's the professional development it's going to take to help school counselors really embrace career literacy? I think that's a great broad question, but I think it also points directly to the idea of what additional PD is missing right now to help school counselors really embrace career development as a whole. We've heard things about work-based learning. We've seen some things from Shiloh in Massachusetts talking about connecting activities, which gets to the work-based learning that you were talking about earlier, Bill, in terms of engaging in that. They're not getting training in this in our academic programs. So what are the components of this kind of PD? And I'm curious.
Well, I think it starts with a change in the view of how people look at this. I see a comment here from Ellen Weaver-Paquette. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correct, who says that many folks think career literacy is for very challenged students who have benefited from special education, but not for mainstream students. And how do we counter that image? And I think that's such an important question. And it really flies in the face of what the real world is. I mean, yes, special ed has done a great job of helping students figure out how they can fit in society and make a contribution. And I think that's why that entire field is often so supportive of the idea of career literacy. But really, all students are going to need a career going forward, unless they happen to be the child of Bill Gates or something. So it really applies to all students, and the sooner we help them start thinking about this, I think the better off we're going to be. It's going to be one of the most important decisions they ever make. And again, if we focus education more on this, I think it raises it to a higher level than just the box we sort of locked ourselves on in recent years, that it's all about the test scores and how are we going to get all the students to pass and that kind of thing. This is really a much higher calling. How are we going to help them be successful in society? Because when you meet a student 5 or 10 years after they graduated, you aren't asking them how they did in that math test back in 10th grade. You're asking them, of course, have they found a career? What's going on with their personal life? It's questions like that. And that career literacy is critical to helping them prepare for that.
Yeah, it does sound like that we need to make sure it's for all students and not people aren't going to take it out as a specific group. The other thing that came up is Ellen also mentioned the fact that we do have the Global Career Development Facilitator certification, which does provide a certain level of professional development specific to career development, which is certainly a kind of a first step towards some training. It does seem that there's some additional training, though, or professional development that we also need to be looking at with the whole concept of college career readiness that's going on. So if people have ideas of other things that may be missing in all of that, we're talking about things like financial literacy, areas of, we talked about labor market information evaluation, but when we start thinking about the leadership roles to help get work-based learning access and other things, it does seem like there might be some additional skill sets that we might want to look at. But there was something else that came up in this conversation. Someone mentioned this idea of a credential, and I want to get her name, Cynthia Matthews, concerned that wouldn't a credential just be another example of the European model, which I understand credentials are often coming out of, to just simply channel someone into a particular occupation and not really open up their opportunities, but really close them down. And how are these middle and high school students supposed to be making career decisions at such an early stage? And isn't that going to simply kind of perpetuate the problem as opposed to support it? Bill, I've got comments on that, but what is your reaction to something like that?
My reaction is that you've got to start with where we are right now, that so many students aren't prepared and so many young adults are really struggling enormously. So we have a real problem in this country. It's really a crisis. And as I said at the beginning, so many young people now feel like the American dream is out of reach for them. So that's why we need to respond to this. So what we're advocating is not pigeonholing young people into a career, but really start introducing them to the idea. I think the core concept is, you can be successful. You can still achieve the American dream. That's such an important message, particularly for low-income students. And, if you're going to do that, you need to find a career. So we're going to introduce you to a career. You're going to pick one that seems to be a good fit for them, recognizing that as they mature, they may want to move in a different direction. But even if they do, they've learned a lot that's going to benefit them as they move forward. They've learned about what it takes to be successful in a career. They've learned a lot about exploring career opportunities, et cetera. So it's not a lost cause. I mean, we've had that conversation in academic subjects for years. Why take Latin? You're never going to speak Latin, when you grow up. But there are many arguments in favor of studying Latin.
So let me jump in on this then and give a different. This might be an area interesting. An interesting dilemma on it. So you're coming at it, I think, from the vocational technical education perspective. That's where a lot of your work has been. And from the vocational technical education way, we are trying to help individuals find a pathway that gives them the option of going into the world of work directly from high school. And there's definitely a lot of support for that as an option. And by having those kinds of skill sets and having made some of those decisions early on, we know that they're going to be in a beginning role, but it's going to hopefully build towards a higher paying jobs, and that's something that we've been missing. Another perspective on it is as you look at the career clusters and the career pathways, when you look at the skill sets, and this is something you were starting to remark on, is that most of the skill sets that you're learning in any of those career pathways are generalizable across different career areas. And so one might argue that what we're building is a core set of competencies that will enable them to be adaptive and move into many different career areas. That we're not just, in other words, instead of using this as a process of making a decision, what we're doing is using career literacy as a way of building competencies that they can then apply across a spectrum, a range of careers. And that if we help them graduate from high school with an understanding of how their skill sets and how their interests can apply across a variety of occupations, and as important, understand the education pathways, both the 2-year and the 4-year education pathways to achieve it, that what we're doing is we're mobilizing an army, a generation of youth that can navigate more effectively through this process. What the credential does is it's sort of at the demarcation point that the individual has established some skills and they understand what it means to establish skills. So it's not that those competencies or that credential is pigeonholing them. If it's done as a way of saying, look what you can accomplish, then hopefully that would set up sort of a foundation for future success. And I think the data point that's starting to point that out is that many of the students that go through vocational technical high school training actually perform quite well in college. And I don't think it's a direct link between what they learned in the high school or that occupation and what they did in a 4-year university, but there's something about their perceived sense of the relevance and something about their competency, this is my hypothesis, that may be driving that forward. So it's a bit of a shift because I think vocational technical education was originally designed to take a group of students and help them become employable right away. What we're doing is wanting to scale up the concept of using hands-on learning, work-based learning, to really deepen the career development process. So that's just the shift. Any reactions to Bill to that? And I haven't had a chance to look at the...
Yeah, I think one example I'd cite, and many people on the call, certainly those from Massachusetts, know who Larry Rosenstock is. He started out in Cambridge and went out to San Diego and started High Tech High. And I was just visiting High Tech High and talking to the students there. So High Tech High is not a vocational high school. It's not offering CTE classes at all on things like carpentry or plumbing or anything like that. However, they put enormous emphasis on the concept of career literacy. So when you're in 8th grade, you do a whole unit on really spending a whole year thinking about the concept of my dream job. That's what they call it, my dream job. Not a job that you might have to settle for, but really what would you like to do? And then as they move forward, they require all juniors and seniors to do real internships, not just something that's made up or really not thought through. And that really exposes them to the field they're interested in. Now, in addition to that, of course, High Tech High is famous for tremendous emphasis on project-based learning in interdisciplinary studies. The result of that is that even though many of their students are low-income minority students, they have one of the nation's highest rates of not only students going to college, but completing college. It's really a model that works, and I think a great example of what career literacy can be. So there's a school that's not using traditional vocational education at all, but they are emphasizing career literacy in a way that really works.
That's great. And I think we've got Rob and Russell put in some things from Colorado. They've been doing a lot on college career readiness lately and relaunched their ILP program, and that this whole idea of using credentials as one way to demonstrate college and career readiness is something that their state is getting ready to put into effect. And I saw that we've also got a lot going on in other places. Let's see, Sheila or Andondo put down some things. So everybody's kind of throwing down, which is awesome, different resources and different things that are connecting to this conversation. Well, we have any 4-credit programs at non-career vocational technical education high schools that target summer employment opportunities, or any 4-credit programs. So interesting idea about, I mean, this is one of the big crises that's going on internationally, is youth are not getting access to the summer jobs. It has a huge impact on families, but also has a huge impact on career development as well, because they're not getting access to the world of work. Any ideas on that, Bill, or if anyone else has ideas, please throw that in as we're going.
Well, I think one idea is, and that's why we're so excited that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has agreed to host this meeting, is that we really need to work closely with the business community if we're going to solve this employment issue. And I think we need to change the conversation from the idea that somehow these companies are doing youth a favor or it's part of their philanthropy effort, and really go to the idea that this is the central strategic mission. You know, at the end of the day, and I spent many years as a business reporter and talked to CEOs all over the world, at the end of the day, talent is often a differentiator in terms of whether your company is going to be successful or not. You really need good people if you're going to be successful. And what's happening today is that many business leaders are saying they're having a very difficult time finding the right people. They might be able to hire people, but they're really not sufficiently motivated. They're really not the people they would love to have. And I think the whole concept of work-based learning, which can start with a summer job, is a great way to address that problem. You're introducing students to what your field has to offer, and then if they're interested, you can help them if they move forward. One great example of that is Alcoa, the world's leading aluminum company. And they decided that very few students are just going to decide that they want to go into the aluminum industry. It's not, it's not that well known. It's not something that they're likely to gravitate to. So they've created a very aggressive program of internships starting with freshmen in college to introduce them to the industry, all the exciting opportunities it offers, et cetera, so they can help grow in that area. And I think many retailers are beginning to realize that if they offer some employment or employment during the school year to students, that's going to ultimately benefit them going forward if they handle it the correct way, not as a dead-end job, but as something that's going to provide a pathway to help students develop skills that are going to allow them to be more successful going forward.
Great. So Livonia, thank you. She sent up a question that some people are asking about, which is, how do we get this information about the nature of career, literacy and its critical importance? How do we get that to the decision makers? And I think that the issue here by decision makers is it's probably multiple levels. And I know we've got a number of people from the state leadership. So I'd love to hear your comments on who you need to have influenced to be able to get this at the table. But we're also talking about the people in organizations and their leaders, whether it's principals or other educators. What's your thoughts on that? How do we help get this to the decision makers so they have a better understanding of the critical role and importance of career literacy?
Yeah, so I think there's several different aspects to that. I think at the highest level, we need to talk to superintendents and certainly state superintendents, members of Congress, members of legislators, and governors about the importance of career literacy and how we really need to emphasize that a lot more than we have up till now. That's how the South Carolina program took off. The governor down there was really interested in this, and they launched, they passed a major bill. This was about 10 years ago now, where, for example, they said they were going to reduce the ratio of students to counselors to 250 to 1, which is the national standard set by ASCA, but of course most states don't do that. So we need to work at that level, and if we can make this more of a priority, a societal priority, then I think it'll start flowing to the business leaders who can share information about what their fields offer, to the schools of education, colleges of education that can start incorporating career development into how they prepare teachers, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot of people who need to be involved in this effort if we're going to make it happen. And so I think it starts at the top with the looking at the importance of career literacy, how we need to change our view of education, getting senior policymakers to embrace that idea, and then working down through the system to the people who are actually going to deliver the information.
That's right.
And also to parents. I think parents play an critically important role, and that's one reason why if we make career readiness a central component of the accountability system, and parents start receiving report cards that indicate that it looks like your child is on track to go to college, but they really are not career ready at this point, I think that'll start changing the way parents look at things, and they might start asking, why aren't they career ready, and what can we do to address that issue?
Great. I think I'll give a couple of shout outs now to some of our states. So if you go online and look at, for Colorado, you type in ICAP. This is the Individualized Career and Academic Plan. You can go for for Arizona soon. I don't know if it's up yet. If anyone from Arizona can let us know. Sheila, I don't know if it's actually on yet, but they have what's called the ECAP. Everybody's got fancy names for the Individualized Learning Plan. But these are a couple of states. Wisconsin has it as well. Massachusetts certainly has implementation guides and lots of resources on college career readiness. But the key here is that some of these resources, they've really focused a lot on communication. And they've tried to provide sections that you can actually pull out for different leaders, whether it's the district, whether it's parents, other teachers. How is it that we can sell the importance of career development to these different groups? Why should they be interested? And so there is some language out there that you can draw from that people are asking you to borrow. The work we've done with the National Collaborative on Workforce and Disability for Youth has some materials on ILPs as well. But this has been one of the issues: is how can we communicate a single and a good, strong message forward? And so the states are actually working on your behalf to help provide you all with language to do that. So I really encourage you to try to look at that. And thanks, Sheila, as well as we've got Shayla as well from Massachusetts putting down some links for you all. So that's one of the areas that I wanted. I also wanted to respond. Someone, and I apologize, I don't have the name in front of me. We've got so much going on here. But this whole idea that we need to find a way to make career literacy a curriculum that can be integrated seamlessly into the rest of the academic context. And I think that that's exactly on target. And would love if there are any state officials, or those of you that are doing it right now. I know there's a lot of curriculum out there that's starting to come up, but what we're really describing is how do we design it in a way with grade level expectations and standards that we can say across the year, here's how we're going to do it. I know Kentucky is probably one of the best at mandating a full state curriculum that every school will do from middle and high school, which is exciting. We've been advocating, and I know Arizona and Minnesota, Wisconsin, a lot of states, Massachusetts has some great demonstration sites where we're trying to focus on helping the district define that curriculum and exactly what you described, which is how to create a seamless curriculum that we can all find a way to integrate it well. Some of the things nationally that we found is that use of advisory periods is really a good way of doing that. And I know that many, many districts are starting to move towards advisories, and it seems like a natural place where you can get a small group, a caring adult, but they need curriculum. They need to know how to do this, and they need training. So there's definitely some things here that is important. Sheila brought up mandatory courses happening in 7th grade in places like Utah. So they're starting to look at it. I think we have to find a way to learn from each other as we're going forward. I have 7 minutes left on our talk today. We're going to have a hard stop right at the hour. Let's see, Livonia, you're on the phone. If there's any other questions that you're seeing coming up that we need to get to right now. I haven't had a chance to go back through to see what's happening, but again, a lot of chat. We'll make sure we get the chat recorded. We'll copy it down and make a list. We will compile a list of the resources that have been identified so that you can all have access to that as well. I've got a little thing from Livonia here. What does it say? Oh, she doesn't have any questions yet. So if there's some other comments. Bill, some other thoughts you've had as we've gone through a number of different topics, obviously with lightning speed. We've had a number of people putting out some great resources. Other thoughts you have in terms of the conversation?
Yeah, I'd cite two comments. One is we talked about how can you promote this at the state level. Here in Arizona, Career Leadership Network has been formed. It was created last year. Scott, of course, you've been directly involved in that. You've come out twice for annual meetings. But we brought into that not only the Department of Education, but a lot of affiliated organizations, including some of the key business organizations in the state, the school counselors, et cetera, to really talk about how can we promote what we call ECAPs in Arizona. That's the Individual Learning Plan. And at the recent day-long meeting we had about this in late August, one of the things we did was highlight 4 schools in our school districts in Arizona that have really prioritized career literacy. And it's had a dramatic impact on high school graduation rates, reducing the dropout rate college persistence, et cetera, in all 4 of those districts. I mean, this is something that really does work. And so now, based on that, we're trying to sort of relaunch ECAPS and give it a lot more visibility and support. The second thing I'd like to point out is what can happen when you embrace the vision of career literacy and then start figuring out how are you going to actually achieve that. And we're involved in a pilot project right now in Phoenix at a high school with very low-income students. The average family income is about $25,000. But we're actually working with Avid. Avid, of course, works in over 40 states preparing students for college, but now they're deciding that career literacy needs to be part of their curriculum. And we found a professor at Arizona State who's at that high school. She's developed a curriculum on career development, which is going to be modified and incorporated into the Avid curriculum. So the students are going to be learning about career development. And then another element is we're bringing in retirees who are going to serve as mentors to the students. So these are people who've been in the workforce for 30 or 40 years, really know what it's like to have a job, and they're going to be mentoring the students. They're going to be serving as caring adults. So that's one example of what can happen if you embrace the idea of career literacy. And I think if as a country we did that, you'd see efforts like this blossoming all over the place. It would have a tremendous impact on student success. And I think a key idea we need to keep in mind is that so many students have lost hope, particularly low-income students. They really don't think there's a way out for them. They don't think it's possible for them to succeed. What we're really talking about doing is reinstilling that hope and reviving the American dream.
You know, what you're describing, which is really exciting, and I've seen there's many states that are doing a similar idea, is we need to put out these demonstration projects to show people what's actually possible. And you've mentioned leveraging a number of different resources, community-based resources to get in the discussion. I know that issues of school counselor ratios come up a lot in terms of how they can be more effectively involved if we can get the ratio back to 250 to 1. And I think what's interesting about the development projects, and you mentioned the studies that are going on. I know Massachusetts has a nice report out too on this for the 5 districts that they looked at, is we've got to find a way to get reports on the effects of what they did, how they did it, and then we need to get these sent up. And so we'll try to get the report done on the Massachusetts one out to everybody. But I'm looking forward to Arizona with the 4 school counselors that presented on their ECAPS that you'd mentioned, and how they can demonstrate just in their own case study how the impact it's had on their graduation rates and college participation. But what's exciting is hearing them talk about how they mobilize these different resources like you just described with the project in Phoenix. We need these stories. We need to hear the examples of what's possible and what can happen. And so I think with that, as I'm looking at the stuff we've got, it looks like people have thrown down lots of resources, which we will collect. We'll add in this report that I know the Donahue group did for the state of Massachusetts. If other groups have reports on some of the demonstrations or case studies, that would be great. Send them to us. You've got the emails here, so we can add it to it. But I've got one more thing from Livonia. Wow, she came in there late there. I don't know if we'll have time to respond to some of the questions at the very end here, but we'll try to do something in writing as well. What I want to do, though, is thank Bill. Thank you very much for taking the time to chat with us today about the important career literacy work. We're excited about this national kind of campaign and look forward to more information as things happen. We are in the final minute, so I'm going to go ahead, Bill, if there's any final comments you want to make, or Livonia, if you've got anything you want to say, jump on in. But otherwise, I think we're going to close it. Bill, any final comment?
I'd just like to thank everybody who took part in the webinar today. Feel free to contact me if you want to be involved in the work going forward. And I think this is really, I think the moment is coming to really elevate the work that all of you have been involved with for so many years.
All right. Well, thank you all again very much. We have your email addresses. We'll make sure you know about our next webinars coming up, and we will make sure we get the information out to you about the resources from today. Thank you all.